All right, like we talked about in the past, exposure, white balance, focus. Focus is the most important because we can't fix it in post. It's just impossible. Whereas exposure and white balance, you can definitely fix in post to a certain degree. So we need some tools on this camera to help us get focused because the screen on the back is so small. I mean, you can judge exposure pretty well on a small screen, but because your eye is very sensitive to it, but it's such a small screen, seeing that fine level of detail in terms of what is in focus and what's not becomes a lot harder. And that's why a lot of times I'll use an external monitor, like a 7-inch monitor, to make things a lot bigger. I'm looking at that right now, and it definitely helps out a lot. So before I begin, I want to clear up a little bit of confusion. I mean, when I got this camera right off the bat, I was a little bit confused, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on, things that were in the menu versus what's on the camera. And one classic example right here is on continuous autofocus, and we've turned it on. But you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, Dave. On the lever switch where the AF/AE button is located, if we move that to our AFC, you might be thinking, AFC, doesn't that stand for autofocus continuous? And if I have it on that, why do I need to bother going to the menu? Well, that is only for stills. And what you see in the menu is only for video. So I'm sure as they designed this camera and they added features, this is probably the only way they could do it. But it is kind of confusing because AFC, which stands for autofocus continuous, is when you're doing a burst and like somebody's walking toward you, or sports mode, somebody's doing a motocross type action across your frame and you're going and you're tracking them as you go along. And it slows down your frames per second when you're in this mode, but it has nothing to do with video. I mean, it does in the fact that you could either be in this mode, lever switch, or the other one that's labeled AFS, AFF. So those two ones to the left, not manual focus, but those two ones to the left of the lever switch are basically autofocus modes, and it doesn't matter which one you're in. Just another reminder, if you're in a variable frame rate mode, and you've turned this on and you've turned it to, let's say, 96 frames per second, autofocus will not work in video mode. All right, digital zoom, or if you're any sort of creative effect, you will also not be able to use autofocus in video mode. Also, if you look at the screen here, and if you see something that's a little bit different, because I'm going to actually turn this off, but if you see like a little plus sign inside your box where you want to focus, if you see that, that's because you are in a spot metering mode. So remember, to get into spot metering, just go down here and turn that to something other than spot meter. And then you'll notice that goes away. So if you're wondering why you see it on your screen and you're not seeing it on mine, that's why. All right, with that out of the way, I want you to move your lever switch to manual focus mode on the back of the camera. And what you can do with your fingers, it's like an iPhone or Android device, you can pinch to zoom. So we can actually change the size of the box just by moving. Like if I keep going in, and then I hit the shutter button halfway or hit the exit button right here on the screen, you'll see that the box itself right here has gotten smaller. Likewise, if I go and I go the other direction, where I go out like this, and then I hit exit, you'll see that the box got a lot bigger. So the reason I'm telling you that is because we've got 3 different things in this frame that we can focus on. Let's say if we try to focus on that digital target over her shoulder, you'll notice it's having a really tough time. It's like, I can't get it because I think the shoulder is the closest, therefore I'm going to focus on that. So what we're going to do is go ahead and pinch and zoom. We're going to zoom all the way in as far as we can. Go ahead and hit the exit button. And now we can position this box over the digital target behind her shoulder, and then it'll grab focus really nice and fast. And likewise, we could just move it over to her eye. I'm shooting at f2.8, by the way, so it's nice and shallow. And then we can go all the way over here to the label on my lens. See if it grabs it. And let's try a little high contrast area right here. Nope. It worked before. Okay, let's rotate that label. So basically what it's looking for is a high contrast area. And there it goes, it grabbed it. So like I've talked about before, this is my favorite way to focus. When you have your lever on MF and then you just take your finger and you move it around the screen. If you've set the camera up like we did in the chapters before this, the same way I did, you should be able to do this. Just click or push your finger down the screen and drag it to location and then release, and then it grabs focus quite easily. Now this works really well on the Panasonic lenses. So the 12 to 35 that I'm using right now, the 35 to 100, this method works extremely well. Now, if you get into third-party glass, this is a Voigtlander 0.95. So this one goes down to 2.8 f-stop. This goes down to 0.95. So if we're to double it, you could say roughly it's a 1.8. So you can get super thin shallow depth of field, which we're going to demonstrate here in a little bit. But these type of lenses, you won't be able to use this type of feature. You'll definitely be needing a different tool like focus peaking. Now that method works great when you're just looking at the screen, but let's say it's a bright sunny day, the sun's coming from behind you, hitting the screen, you can't see it, you're going to the EVF, and you want to look at it that way and you want to try. Well, you can flip the screen out like I've done here, and then you can take your thumb, and then you can move your thumb around the screen and reposition it. But what happens here, like what I just did there, it worked fine. But when you put your head up against the EVF, something changes. So let me kind of show you my workflow of when I'm using the EVF. So I'm going to cover over the EVF with my hand.